This is part of Kael's journey. If you like dark stories, legends, and betrayal, subscribe now to follow every chapters.
The sky above the valley of Variathus was darkened not by clouds, but by the smoke of anticipation. Kael stood on a cliff overlooking his first true battlefield since returning from the barbarian lands. Below, two armies faced each other like mirrored beasts, one lean and desperate, the other confident and arrogant. Beside him stood Cassius, the son of Lucius Varro and Kael's last true connection to his father's fallen comrades. Cassius was a soldier of principle, one who had seen glory and gore in equal measure. Now he waited, sword in hand, as the enemy banners waved arrogantly in the wind. Kael's voice broke the silence. They know we're not ready, but they also don't expect us to fight like ghosts. Cassius gave a grim nod. Then let's haunt them. The first horn blew. Like a curse, it echoed through the valley. Kael's legion descended into the valley like a tide of bronze and red. The clash was immediate. Steel met steel. Cries filled the air, and the earth was soaked with the blood of the bold. Kael fought fiercely, leading from the front. He ducked a spear, parried a sword, and drove his blade into a man's throat. The enemy pushed hard, but Kael's soldiers held for hours. Then the flanks began to buckle. Arrows rained from the hills. A second enemy force, hidden, struck from behind. The tide turned in an instant. Cassius shouted orders, rallying the broken lines. He fought like his father once did, fearless, brilliant. But just as they began to push back, a javelin pierced his chest. Kael caught him as he fell, blood soaking his armor. "Go, avenge him, avenge your father," Cassius whispered before his eyes closed forever. The retreat was brutal. Kael dragged the wounded, screamed for those who fled to regroup, but the valley became a slaughter. When night fell, they vanished into the shadows, their numbers halved. Kael didn't sleep that night. He sat by Cassius's body, his hands shaking, his resolve hardening. One battle was over, but the war was far from done.
The survivors marched in silence. Their boots stirred the dust of loss. There were no songs, no chants, only the grinding silence of the feet and the rattling wheels of carts carrying the wounded. Kael rode at the head of a column. He bore no helmet now, only grief. His men watched him with wary eyes, some still loyal, others uncertain. Fear and doubt had seeped into Legion's heart. Cassius had been more than a soldier. He had been a symbol of old honor, of a legacy tied to Kael's own. His death left a void that could not be filled. Kael ordered a pyre to be built. They stopped beside a hill where white wildflowers grew among the rocks. The flames climbed into the sky as Kael gave a quiet eulogy. He was the last son of the old oath, and I am the last who remembers it. He placed Cassius's sword into the fire. The steel hissed as if resisting. The men watched, many weeping openly. That night, the camp was silent. Kael sat alone, sharpening his blade. Every scrape of metal was a vow. The scouts returned by morning with grim news. Reinforcements would not come. Rome had turned its eyes elsewhere, abandoning the frontier. Kael's force would stand alone. The enemy, emboldened, was marching again. But Kael was not broken. He gathered his captains. We will not run, not because we are brave, but because we remember. The second battle was coming, and Kael, with death beside him, would meet it head on. Intense, defiant, tragic heroism. The morning of the second battle was painted red with sunrise and expectation. The wind carried the scent of burned wood and steel oil. Kael stood with his cloak torn, armor dented, eyes hollow yet burning. They took position on a hilltop, the only strategic point left. Behind them, nothing but barren lands, no escape. Kael addressed his men. This is not about victory. It is about memory, about defiance, about being the scar Rome cannot ignore. He raised his sword. The men, though exhausted and outnumbered, roared with fire. The enemy approached in full force, organized, well-equipped, and confident. Trumpets blared, arrows flew, the ground trembled. Kael led the charge downhill. Like a falling thunderbolt, his soldiers crashed into the enemy front. The first wave scattered, caught off guard by the sheer fury. But numbers mattered. Soon the tide turned. For every enemy that fell, two rose. Kael's men died standing. They held until shields broke, swords bent, and the air was filled with screams. Kael fought like a man already dead, fearless, furious, unrelenting. He cut a path through the enemy ranks, even as blood poured from his wounds. And then, through the dust, he saw him. Gaius alias Scarpus, now a general, observing from afar with a smirk. Kael roared and charged, but a blow to the back sent him to his knees. Then another. The world turned black. The last thing Kael saw before he faded was the enemy raising their banners in triumph. Rome would remember the victory, but it would not remember Kael.
Of Rome erupted in celebration. Gaius alias Scarpus rode at the front of the victorious procession. His armor shone like the sun, untouched by blood. Children threw flowers, senators applauded. The emperor watched from his marble throne, face unreadable. Scarpus raised a hand, milking the crowd. He was hailed as the savior of the northern frontier. Statues were promised, songs composed, the truth buried. No word of Kael, no mention of the fallen legion, only glory, tailored and polished, offered to the people like wine. Behind the spectacle, whispers circulated. Some said the victory had come at a strange cost, that too many had died, that the enemy had been allowed to grow first. But none spoke it aloud. Scarpus had climbed too high. His influence reached the Senate, the military, even the palace. Kael's name vanished from reports. Cassius's death was not even recorded. In the baths, the generals toasted to peace. In the forums, playwrights turned the battle into patriotic verse. And beneath it all, the city moved on. Rome remembers only the victors, but shadows remember the truth. Kael's body drifted through days of pain and delirium. He was barely alive, slumped in mud, his wounds festering. His armor stripped, sword gone, identity erased. Crows circled. He could not move. Then voices, harsh, foreign, laughs. A boot nudged his ribs. Still breathing? That one's worth something. Hands lifted him. Chains clicked. His vision swam. The slavers spoke in a mix of tongues. Kael understood only the cruelty in their tone. He was tossed into a cart among other bodies, some dead, some wishing they were. Time passed in blinks. Rain, hunger, whips, darkness. He dreamed of fire, of his father, of Cassius, of betrayal. His hand always reached for a sword that was no longer there. Finally, the sea, the scent of salt, chains around his neck and wrists, the sound of gulls replaced by orders barked in Greek. A slave galley. Its black sails towered above. Kael, once a soldier of Rome, was now nothing more than cargo. The galley creaked and groaned, pulled by the agony of chained men. Kael's hands blistered on the oar. Each stroke was pain, each breath defiance. The overseers lashed those who faltered. The drumbeat marked the rhythm of suffering. Kael did not speak, but in his silence he observed the ship's layout, the guards' routines, the cracks in discipline. He was not broken, only dormant. He learned names, faces, weaknesses. He spoke to none, but his eyes said everything. One night, a fellow slave whispered, "You fight?" Kael only nodded. Another voice, "You led men?" He nodded again. In that hold of sweat and misery, a spark began to form. Kael was beaten daily, but his resolve was steel beneath the bruises. His chains rattled like old ghosts. He waited, not for mercy, but for a moment. Night over the Aegean. The moon silvered the waves. Kael lay awake. The stars above reminded him of home, of battles, of oaths whispered in the dark. His muscles ached, his body was failing, but his soul still sharp. The name Scarpus repeated in his mind like a curse. They had erased him from scrolls, from Rome's memory. But memory lived in the hearts of those wronged. Kael looked to the other slaves, beaten men, forgotten men, but not broken. They watched him now, silently, waiting, trusting. One day, this ship would burn. One day, Kael would return, not as a soldier, but as a reckoning.
Thank you for watching. More stories are coming soon. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the Lost Chapters.